Hello again, wrestling fans, and welcome to another edition of This Week in History. This is actually episode number 17, and we're going to be looking at the week of April 9th to April 15th. And I want to thank you for joining us the last couple of weeks, because we've had a lot of WrestleManias to go through. And whether you're watching us right now, 12 p.m. on Thursday, on YouTube or Facebook, listen to us later on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. We want to thank you. Like, subscribe, share. Let's build this up. We are part of the Ontario Independent Wrestling Podcasting Network here in Ontario, Canada, and the Johners Podcasting Network in the United Kingdom. A lot of great podcasts between both groups. I believe there's over 27 channels with the Johners, and so there's a lot of different content and styles that you can also check out. So this week, as I said, we're going to be doing April 9th to the 15th, and we are going to be a lot shorter probably today than the last couple of weeks, because there's no WrestleManias multiple times happening throughout this segment of time. So to be able to do that, we need to bring in the guy who piles all this knowledge together by scouring the internet. And it's Jonesy in Niagara Falls. Jonesy,
And
how are you tonight?
When I was a kid in grade school, I hated doing this crap. I really did. But if it was about wrestling,
I know.
I'm sure I would have done better in school.
Wrestling or music? I'm like totally boom. Give me a couple tune notes, and boom, I know what song it is. You ask me older history of wrestling, I'm on it. I think I heard a lot of podcasts, because trust me, during WrestleMania week, 9 straight days of TV shows, and then I was also throwing in a lot of podcasts. And the funny thing is, a lot of them are the same way. They can remember from like WrestleMania 1 all the way up until maybe 14-ish with everything without fail. And then later on, it starts getting fuzzy because there's so much and so long and tossing everything around with belts. But it's all the nostalgia stuff that you can remember just like back in your hand.
Yeah, I can remember, I'd say half of the 80s and most of the 90s. Once WCW left, that's when I kind of started watching less, I think, or at least being less interested in the product.
Yeah, they didn't have the competition to compete and keep them motivated.
But I do like what they're doing now, especially allowing with Jericho being on there. I'm hoping they allow other stars that have been in other promotions that worked for them at one point or another. I think it's just that it's a good sign that it's all about the network, man, and the better content you can get,
as
the
Tony
better
Khan
it
calls
will
it,
be.
the forbidden door.
Yeah.
So we'll see how long that holds up. But it's also a sign that maybe WWE finally doesn't figure AEW as being actual competition, just another organization out there like Impact and Ring of Honor and everything that they're willing to get footage from. But we're not talking about current stuff. We're talking about the past. So let's dive into it with April 9th.
All right, jumping in the time machine. 34 years ago, Jim Crockett Promotions purchases Bill Watts Universal Wrestling Federation. That was 34 years ago, long time ago.
If you listen to anything with good old JR and even his books, you read those, he was actually instrumental in negotiating that deal for Cowboy Bill Watts to sell to the Crockett's. And originally, it was supposed to be what people thought was going to happen with WWE and WCW and run as two separate entities. And in this case, you would have had the Jim Crockett Promotions and UWF, and then you could have cross-branded them and did a super show and stuff like that and traded back and forth, even though they were the same banner. And they thought that was going to happen with WWE and WCW, and then they tried it with the brand split, and it just didn't seem to work out.
No, I think they got a better thing with NXT doing it that way as far as having your own competition. Anyways, we're not talking about the future. We're talking about 20 years ago in Tokyo, Japan. Kazuyuki Fujita defeated Scott Norton to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. 16 years ago in Delaware, Petey Williams defeated Puma to win the East Coast Wrestling Association Super 8 tournament. Other participants were Eric Matlock, JJ Perez, Tyson Dukes, Alex Shelley, Andrew Riker, and Rory Fox. 10 years ago, 10 years ago, Kurt Angle pleaded guilty to reckless driving from an incident on March 25th in Thompson, North Dakota. He'd get a whopping $475 fine and an unsupervised probation. 10 years ago in Philly, Adam Cole defeated Sami Callihan to win the CZW Best of the Best tournament. Other participants included Daisuke Sakimoto, Zack Sabre Jr., Jake Christ, A.R. Fox, Brandon Gaston, Chuck Taylor, Kyle O'Reilly, and Johnny Gargano.
That's quite the young picture I found of Adam Cole from that win. Considering what Adam Cole looks like now, like
he's just a baby.
Yeah, with the baby face and the lack of the facial hair on him, it's totally different than the guy that was just headlining TakeOver the other day.
April 10th. 21 years ago, Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo returned to WCW on Nitro. They would add another nail to their coffin as they would reboot WCW by announcing all titles would be vacated and decided that weekend Spring Stampede. Of course, that didn't sit well with fans, and it would just get worse from there. Also on the show, Mike Awesome would make his debut. Talking about getting worse, then in itself is another story as he was the current ECW champion. Of course, there would be some hiccups and a lot of lawyers and contracts to sift through, but eventually they got that sorted out.
Which we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes.
Yes.
On this, but yeah, actually, I think it's 2 weeks ago. 83 Weeks did cover the lead up to that Spring Stampede, and with this whole bringing Eric and Vince in there, and then the reset, and he totally, we're going to talk about it in a moment, did not like Spring Stampede because with the reset, there was no stories to go into that show, and yeah, it just was not the greatest.
I honestly, I don't get to this day why they did that. It would have been better if they just said, hey, Spring Stampede, everyone's title's on the line like it should be in a pay-per-view. I mean, anyways. 21 years ago on a SmackDown taping in Philly, Jeff Hardy defeated Triple H to win the WWF Intercontinental Championship. 12 years ago, Tori Wilson announces her retirement from wrestling. And today would have been the 67th birthday of William Alvin Moody, known as Percival Pringle III, but was best known to wrestling fans, of course, as Paul Bearer. Oh, yes. Yes. April 11th, 57 years ago in Washington, D.C., Buddy Rogers is presented the WWF World Heavyweight Championship belt, making him the promotion's first champion. Rogers would win a kayfabe tournament as Vince McMahon Sr. and Joseph Toops Mont defected from the NWA. It would not last long as Rogers would drop the belt 22 days later in under a minute to Bruno Sammartino. And we see this happen throughout history as far as these promotions. When they first get a champion, they do either a fake tournament or just, something like that. And the guy who has the belt at the beginning loses it very shortly in Eastern Championship Wrestling. They did that. I think it was Snuka was the first champion, but he only had it for a day or two, and it was like, well, your championship means nothing if your first guy doesn't hold it more than a couple days.
Yeah, and they even did that with Rio de Janeiro tournament. They got the Intercontinental title existing.
Yes.
Yeah, that didn't happen. But hey, Del Rio, Pat Patterson won the championship.
26 years ago in Texas, the Rock and Roll Express defeated Dick Murdoch and Randy Rhodes in the finals of a one-night tournament to win the NWA World Tag Team Championship. 24 years ago, over in Kauai, on Good Morning Kuwait, both Vader and The Undertaker are interviewed. The host asks if wrestling is fake, and Vader grabs the host by the tie and flips a table and asks, "Does this look fake to you?" Vader Leon White would be under house arrest for 10 days and pay a fine before returning to the States. I see that video, and honestly, I'm like, how did he even get charged? He grabbed the guy by the tie. That was it. He should have just been banned from the show.
You gotta remember what country they were in. That's a lot different things over there than it is here in North America.
Yeah, and you look how their world is over there, how much unsafer it is over there, and they can't take a guy grabbing them by the tie. I mean, God, they're used to people just walking around with fucking guns, and when someone wins something, a fight or whatever, everyone pulls out their guns. I mean, to me, it just of course, it's another country, and there a lot of rules just don't make sense. Anywho, 22 years ago, WCW presented Spring Stampede from Washington. Rey Mysterio Jr. defeated Kidman to retain the WCW World Cruiserweight Championship. Scott Steiner defeated Booker T to win the vacated WCW US belt. And Diamond Dallas Page defeated Hollywood Hogan, Ric Flair, and Sting in a fatal four-way match to win the WCW heavyweight belt. And Randy Savage was the special referee.
Yeah, they really overloaded the main event in that case. And a lot of people, as I said earlier, the 83 Weeks episode, thought that DDP got it because he was the neighbor of Eric Bischoff and stuff like that. And Eric admits that he was actually rougher on DDP for his career instead of handing him things because he was his neighbor, as opposed to how DDP actually worked his ass off from the bottom to improve. And thanks to even somebody like the Macho Man giving him a rub, made him look better and become better. And it might have come sooner had he not been Eric's neighbor, compared to the fact that he was Eric's neighbor and had to prove that it wasn't sort of a nepotism, best buddy type deal.
Yeah, and DDP, he's a good. It's amazing to watch his career from back in the mid to early 90s. He was wrestling PN News on Clash of the Champions to only like 5 years later, poof, he's a champion. So,
with mismatched tights and cigars and
honestly, that was my favorite look of DDP. The really greasy, slimy looking guy that thinks he's like he's the best ever. And I thought that DDP personally was my favorite. 20 years ago, actually 21 years ago, at a SmackDown taping in Philly, Perry Saturn defeated Crash Holly to win the WWF Hardcore Championship, only to lose it to Taz, only to lose it to Crash Holly. 20 years ago in Tokyo, Genshiro Tenryu, at the time the All Japan Wrestling Triple Crown champion, defeated Taiyo Ki to win the Champion Carnival Tournament. 11 years ago, Texas Stadium was demolished. It was the home of the Dallas Cowboys, was no more. Texas Stadium was imploded in spectacular fashion. The stadium hosted world-class championship wrestling's Parade of Champions events, including Kerry Von Erich's 1984 NWA World Championship win over Ric Flair just 3 months following the death of Kerry's brother David. From the ashes of Texas Stadium rose the home of WrestleMania 32 and AT&T Stadium.
And it's actually going to be the home of WrestleMania 38
Oh,
next
there you go.
April. It's interesting with that one that they did have a date for it, but then all this past weekend they've just said April. So I don't know if they're liking this 2-day format or what's going to happen, but maybe they're just prepared in case they have to do a 2-day format and or move it
If
around because of things.
if I have to guess what they're going to do, is I'm going to guess that the Saturday will be more of an NXT WrestleMania, and then you'll have your big, huge WWF matches on the Sunday. I personally like the 2 days. I think it's a good format, especially with the fact that they're allowed less people in this stadium. Once things get much better, you can actually space out people better. So you do have to rent the stadium maybe for another day, but maybe not, because again, usually on the Saturdays, they had it ready by then, and that's when they do all their practice. So it's
We're also talking about the state of Texas, which had a full stadium for a Blue Jays and Rangers game. So anything's possible. Just, yeah, we'll have to see what happens with that.
10 years ago on Raw, Adam Copeland, best known to wrestling fans as Edge, announces his retirement from professional wrestling due to the risk of paralysis or even death stemming from neck problems and numbness that led to a diagnosis of cervical spinal stenosis. Of course, he would return to in-ring action at Royal Rumble 2020. Also on the same show, Brie Bella defeated Eve Torres to win the WWE Divas Championship. 10 years ago, Alex Wybro, best known to wrestling as Larry Sweeney, who managed Sweet and Sour Inc. and ROH and wrestled in Shakira, hung himself from a turnbuckle post at a wrestling school in Lake Charles, Louisiana. He was just 30 years old. Yikes. When I read that one, I was like, yikes.
Yeah, pretty sad.
8 years ago on Impact Wrestling from Corpus Christi, Chavo Guerrero and Hernandez defeated Bobby Roode and Austin Aries 2-1 in a best-of-3 falls match to win the TNA World Tag Belts. And 7 years ago, the wedding bells would ring as Bryan Danielson and Brianna Garcia, aka Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella, marry in a small wedding ceremony in Sedona, Arizona.
Yeah, it was checked out pictures other than this one, and it was very outdoorsy nature, definitely Daniel Bryan inspired, Bryan Danielson inspired wedding. Honestly, I'm gonna say
I do like outdoor weddings. I've been to one outdoor wedding. I've been to many outdoor receptions, but one outdoor, actually I've been to two now, sorry, outdoor weddings. And they're actually quite nice because really, I'm sorry, unless you're in the wedding party, it's kind of boring. I'm sorry, it is. I'm not a one for weddings, but
it's all good. My wedding almost was an outdoor one, but that didn't happen after all. But I will say that Daniel Bryan probably got my favorite Bella of the two, and lucky guy.
Yeah. April 12th. Oh, and of course, his father-in-law now is, of course, John Laurinaitis, pretty much. So that's even more of a bonus.
Who would have figured that family would have been? Because you got the Bella. Before we jump, since you brought that up, the Bella twins, who were Diva Search models, nearly one hooked up with John Cena, and then that didn't happen. But Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson ends up in that family, and you just mentioned John Laurinaitis, who was a surfer dude, skateboarder, with his character, and of course everybody remembers him as the general manager. But He's also the brother of Road Warrior Animal. So imagine Road Warrior Animal by marriage somehow was the uncle to the Bella twins. Of course, Animal has since passed this past year, but so rest in peace for him. But that whole family, you would never imagine that Road Warrior Animal, Laurinaitis at all would be related.
I'm trying to think. It's very similar to Super Dave Osborne, and I can't remember the guy's name. He's famous. They're brothers, and you wouldn't even know that they were. Uh, Anyways, April 12th, 41 years ago in Philly, the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika defeated Ivan Putski and Tito Santana to win the WWF Tag Team Championship. And heck, I totally forgot that Ivan Putski actually was, someone at one time. 34 years ago, Michael Brett Atkinson, best known to wrestling fans as Mike Von Erich, dies of suicide. At the time, he had some legal troubles and suffered from head injuries after an auto accident in which his vehicle overturned. At the time of his death, he was 1/3 of the World Class Championship Wrestling six-man tag team champions with brother Kevin and Lance. And Lance was a kayfabe brother.
Yeah, it seems
okay,
like
Ivan Putski. Never mind. I'm thinking of Ivan's son.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
But looking at this that I have up here, I found the article in the newspaper for Louisville, and it doesn't look like at all that they put his real name, and that's quite interesting with the fact of like the kayfabe was kept to say that his name was Mike Von Erich instead of Mike Atchison. And it's a shame what actually happened to that family, especially with all the brothers, except for one, doing away with themselves.
Yeah. If you can just adjust your headset, as I'm getting a little crackly on this side. All right. 27 years ago today, WWF taped the 400th episode of Wrestling Challenge from Rochester, New York. Lex Luger defeated Tony DeVito via submission. Jeff Jarrett defeated John Paul. The 1-2-3 Kid defeated Quang. Thurman Sparky Plug defeated PJ Walker. And IRS defeated Jason Hawkins via submission. 24 years ago, at New Japan Pro Wrestling's Battle Formation 97, Riki Koshu and Kensuke Sasaki defeated Tatsumi Fujinami and Kengo Kimura to win the IWGP Tag Team Championship. 22 years ago on Raw is War from Detroit, The Godfather defeated Goldust to win the WWF IC belt. Also on that show, The Rock gets even with Stone Cold Steve Austin by kicking his candy ass and tossing Austin's smoking skull belt into the Detroit River. This was revenge for Austin doing the same thing about a year ago.
Yeah.
18 years ago in Philly, B-Boy defeated Sonjay Dutt to win the 2003 ZZW Best of Best tournament. Other participants included Ruckus, who was replaced by Mark Briscoe due to injury in the first round, Chris Cash, Trent Acid, Rick Blade, Tony Mamaluk, Lil Cholo, Derange, Jay Briscoe, Jimmy Rave, Jason Cross, and AJ Styles. 12 years ago today, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla presented 100 from California. This was their 100th show. They saw the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, defeat the Cutler Brothers to retain the PWG World Tag Team Championship. Brian Danielson defeated Kenny Omega via submission. Joey Ryan defeated Paul London, and Chris Hero defeated Colt Cabana to retain the PWG World Championship. 7 years ago at a Raw taping in Cardiff, Eve Torres defeated Maurice to win the WWE Divas Championship. I never liked that belt.
Yeah, well, the New Japan world title now looks like a moth version of this. If you see their new title that they put out, like, was it inspired by the old butterfly belt?
Could have been. And just let you know, you're just popping a little bit. 10 years ago, at a SmackDown taping, Edge announces his retirement the day after WrestleMania 27. That would lead to a 20-man battle royal that would decide who would face the number one contender for the belt. Christian last eliminated Jack Swagger for the right to challenge Alberto Del Rio for the vacated World Heavyweight Championship at Extreme Rules. 9 years ago in New Jersey, Alex Colon defeated A.R. Fox to win the ZZW Best of the Best 2012 tournament. Other participants included Jonathan Gresham, Biff Busick, Celeb, Conley, Tony End, Alex Reynolds, Shane Hollister, Rick Swan, Shane Strickland, Shiva Kid, and Yuha Nation.
Who is now known as Apollo Crews.
Oh, there you go. Fantastic. 5 years ago, Jonathan Reckner, best known to wrestling fans as Balls Mahoney, dies of a heart attack in his hometown of Spring Lakes Heights, New Jersey. He was 44. Born April 11th, 1972, Reckner began his career at just 15 years old as Abdullah Singh for World Wrestling Council. He would find success as Boo Bradley Jr., which was the younger brother of the character from To Kill a Mockingbird. He would team with Chris Candido, but after months of abuse and the murder of his cat by Candido and Tammy Cinch, he would befriend Cactus Jack, and the two would have a long-standing rivalry with Candido and Cinch. During his time in SMW, he was the Beat the Champ television champion twice. In late 1995, Reckner would have a second go with the WWF as Santa Claus, which, well, didn't work out. Oh, there he is. In 1997, Reckner would join ECW under the name Balls Mahoney. Always with a chair in hand and entering the ring to AC/DC's Big Balls. He would join forces with Axel Rotten as the Hardcore Chair Swingin' Freaks. The duo feuded with the Dudley Boys, but would never win the tag titles together. He would hold the tag titles for 6 days with Masato Tanaka and a couple times with Spike Dudley. Reckner would tour the indie scene post-ECW, enjoy ECW alumni at One Night Stand, and again with the relaunch of ECW. After WWE ECW, he would wrestle for Juggalo Championship Wrestling, Ring of Honor, TNA, and Jersey All Pro Wrestling, most notably. His final match took place at Death Proof Fight Club in December 2015 when he defeated Shemu in a flaming tables match. On April 12th, 2016, just the day after his 41st birthday, Reckner suffered a heart attack in his home in Spring Lakes Heights, New Jersey. It was reported by the Boston Globe that Reckner suffered the effects of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Oh boy, encephalopathy. My tongue doesn't work well. I actually do have a little bit of a speech impediment. CTE for short. His former partner, Axel Rotten, following his death, also showed signs of the disease following his death. He is survived by his wife and his son, Christopher, whom they named after his best friend, Chris Candido. April 13th. 31 years ago, All Japan Pro Wrestling and the WWF presented the U.S.-Japan Wrestling Summit from the Tokyo Dome. Jushin Thunder Liger defeated Akira Nagami. Tiger Mask and Bret Hart fought to a 20-minute draw. The Greek Kabuki defeated Greg Valentine. Generusho Tenru defeated Macho Man Randy Savage. And Andre the Giant and Giant Baba defeated Demolition, Axe and Smash. And the main event was Hogan defeating Stan Hansen. 27 years ago in St. Paul, Minnesota, Jesse Ventura is awarded nearly $810,000 in videotape and merchandising royalties after Minnesota State Court found the WWF liable for fraud and misappropriation of publicity rights. This all stemmed from compensation that other wrestlers and celebrities received for WWF video releases. Ventura believed he too deserved compensation, which the court agreed with him. The case Ventura versus Titan Sports was an important case in regards to restitution law.
Yeah, surprisingly, nothing's come up with the whole thing, especially with the network. Like talent used to get off of DVDs, and you really don't see many DVDs anymore like they used to. And it's all on network, and they really don't get anything off that. So how they get around it, who knows? But they haven't been sued like Jesse did.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. You can hear him talking about that and how it all played out. And it's hilarious because the Body tried to get a union into WWF years ago, and Vince McMahon yelled at him for it, and Jesse basically said, "I'm not worried about it. I got my own union now," because he's with the Hollywood Film Board or whatever the hell it is down there, and so he had his own union, and he basically said that if those fools won't go for a union, then yeah, Jesse laid it out of how it should be done, but people didn't follow him. 24 years ago, ECW makes its pay-per-view debut with Barely Legal. The pay-per-view outlets would request an advance script and no excessive bleeding, among other stipulations. This was due to the mass transit incident 6 months earlier. Mass Transit was a young wannabe wrestler who lied about his age and who trained him. He was pitted in a tag match with Devon Dudley against New Jack and Mustafa of the Gangsters. And the fact that, he obviously didn't know what kind of guy that New Jack could be in a ring, and yikes, I'm sorry. I would, if I was in a match with New Jack, I wouldn't be saying, "Hey man, blade me. I'd be like, "Oh God, please don't blade me." I'd rather take like you throwing yourself from like a balcony than using knives.
Yeah, I think
On
that
that
was covered
card,
on
sorry, go ahead.
I think that was covered on the Dark Side of the Ring episode of New Jack, and yeah, it's quite the story. If you ever check out the mass transit issue.
Yes, it's an interesting story. The Eliminators, Perry Saturn and John Kronos, defeated the Dudley Boys to win the ECW Tag Team Championship. Shane Douglas defeated Pitbull 2 to retain the ECW World Television Championship. Taz defeated Sabu by submission. Terry Funk defeated the Sandman and Stevie Richards in a three-way dance to earn an ECW World Heavyweight Championship match, in which Terry Funk defeated Raven to win the ECW World Heavyweight belt. 21 years ago in Indianapolis, Taz defeated Mike Awesome via submission in just 75 seconds to win the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. This was a surprise to many as Mike Awesome jumped to WCW while still ECW champ. A deal would be struck for Awesome to face against WWF signed wrestler Taz. This was believed to be the only time a contracted WCW actually wrestled and faced a contracted WWF wrestler for the ECW belt on TV. Taz would only hold the title for 9 days, losing it to Tommy Dreamer at SummerSlam 2000, only to lose it less than a half hour later to Justin Credible. I will say out of from 90 to early 2000, that was probably the biggest, to me, the biggest crossover that actually happened. That was kind of neat.
Yeah, huge story in that regards, because as you pointed out, it was 3 different companies basically involved, because it was one company's title being defended by another company's employee and challenged by a different employee from a different company. And how it all worked out is just kind of weird. but they all agreed to at least do it because WWE had their working relationship with Heyman because they were actually floating ECW, and I'm imagining so that WCW did not get sued over the issue. They agreed to have that match, and yeah, just not what you'd really wrap your mind around ever seeing ever again.
19 years ago, World Wrestling All-Stars presented Eruption from the Rod Laver Arena in Melbourne, Australia. Tio defeated Puppet the Psycho Dwarf in a midget hardcore match. Man, I wish I could see that. AJ Styles defeated Jerry Lynn to win the WWA International Cruiserweight Championship. Sabu defeated Devon Storm in a steel cage match. And Scott Steiner defeated Nathan Jones by submission to win the WWA World Heavyweight Championship. And Sid Vicious was the special enforcer. 19 years ago in Tokyo, Shiro Tenryu defeated Toshiaki Kawada to win the vacated All Japan Pro Wrestling Triple Crown Championship. 14 years ago in Osaka, Japan, Yuji Nagata defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship and ending Tanahashi's title reign at 270 days. 13 years ago, TNA presented Lock Down 2008, where every match was contested in a steel cage. Some of the matches on that card was Gail Kim and ODB defeated Awesome Kong and Rasha Saeed. Team Cage, Christian Cage, Kevin Nash, Rhino, Sting, and Matt Morgan defeated Team Tonko, consisting of course, Tomko, AJ Styles, Team 3D, and James Storm in a lethal lockdown match. And the main event saw Samoa Joe defeat Kurt Angle to win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. 12 years ago, WWE presented the 2009 WWE Draft. John Cena defeated Jack Swagger to win 2 draft picks for Raw. Edge defeated Carlito, Chavo Guerrero, Finlay, JTG, Mark Henry, Mike Knox, MVP, Paul Burchill, Primo, R-Truth, Ricky Ortiz, Shad, The Big Show, and Tyson Kidd in a 15-man battle royal to win 2 draft picks for SmackDown. Matt Hardy defeated CM Punk by DQ, and Batista, Shane, and Triple H defeated Legacy, Cody Rhodes, and Ted DiBiase. The big moves of the night were going to Raw, MVP, Big Slow, and Triple H, and going the other way to SmackDown were CM Punk, Kane, and Jericho.
Yeah, I don't mind sometimes when the draft actually looks good and makes sense, because sometimes they need to shake it up. But the downside to what they end up doing with these drafts is ignoring it later on when on a random Raw, a SmackDown guy can show up and you're just like, oh, okay. And they just don't really have an excuse, or they come up with a lame thing of some random wild card night that somebody can do that. It's like, no, it doesn't make it special. If you keep these guys away from each other as much as possible and they only cross paths every once in a while, unfortunately, right now, as a pay per view, they would end up seeing each other. Then, it is special when they are drafted and you go, oh, this dream match type deal. And you hold somebody off for a year from being able to cross paths. That's when the worth is there. But when it doesn't make any sense, kind of loses the flavor of it. But I'd love to see it happen where, especially if you get a good storyline, having 2 people only cross paths at a pay-per-view every once in a while, you see just a little hint and sprinkle here and there of, oh, they just passed each other, or interrupted each other or something, or this one's watching that one, and they can't touch each other because they're on different brands. But then all of a sudden, whew, they merge happens, or the trade happens that one person goes to the other side, and now the possibility of them facing each other is doable. then you got your dream match scenario. But right now, there is no dream matches, really.
No, I think there's dream matches, but not with wrestlers that are signed by WWE. 80 years ago in LA, Ed Strangler Lewis defeated Ed Don George to win the World Heavyweight Championship. And we're on April 14th. I can't remember if I even said that. 38 years ago, the Japan Pro Wrestling Alliance shuts down. This comes shortly after their two top stars, Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki, left to form their own companies and took many of the JWA wrestlers with them. These two companies, All Japan Pro Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling. 32 years ago, Jerry Lawler defeated Kerry Von Erich to win the WCWA Unified World Heavyweight Championship. 11 days later, that belt would be unified with the AWA World Belt, with Lawler again defeating Kerry Von Erich.
And as you see, Jerry with all three titles.
Oh, yeah.
It was from Pro Wrestling Illustrated.
I always like their logo. 28 years ago, WCW makes its debut in New York City at the Paramount Theater in Madison Square Gardens. This was a big deal. Van Hammer defeated Vinny Vegas. The Hollywood Blondes, Steve Austin and Brian Pillman, defeated Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Too Cold Scorpio to retain the NWA WCW World Tag Team Championship. Rick Rude defeated Cactus Jack, and Sting defeated Big Van Vader by disqualification in a WCW World Heavyweight Championship match. 17 years ago, at a NWA TNA weekly pay-per-view taping in Nashville, Apollo and D'Lo Brown defeated Kid Cash in Dallas by intentional disqualification to win the NWA World Tag Team Championship. 13 years ago on Raw from England, Mickie James defeated Beth Phoenix to win the WWE Women's Championship for a fourth time. And 13 years ago, at a TNA Impact taping at Universal Orlando, Kaz and Super Eric win the TNA tag belts. But after Super Eric refused to take off his mask, even though Kaz and Eric Young earned a title shot, Jim Cornette strips them of the titles, holding them up until the Sacrifice pay-per-view. On the same show, Petey Williams cashes in his Feast or Fried briefcase and defeated Jay Lethal to win the TNA X Division Championship. 11 years ago, Eugene Nicholas Knitsky, a.k.a. Gene Knitsky, died of cancer in a long-term care facility in Blaine, Washington. He was 81 years old. Gene was one of 6 children of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada alderman Julia Knitsky. Gene would excel in sports in high school and would be invited to the Edmonton Eskimos camp along with Al Ordning and Stu Hart. He would earn a scholarship to the University of Arizona and would get into professional wrestling at the same time. He would be trained by Dory Funk Jr. and Tony Morelli and made his pro wrestling debut on February 13th, 1952, less than a month removed from college. He would suffer a torn kneecap and would eventually retire from football to concentrate on wrestling full time. He would have great success in NWA, AWA, winning many championships, and was considered one of Canada's best athletes. He would even win the AWA World title and tag titles on the same day. Knitsky was inducted as an inaugural member of the World Observer newsletter Hall of Fame in 1996. In 2004, he was inducted into the professional wing of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. In 2007, he was inducted into the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame and inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2008.
Yeah, oddly enough, you didn't mention a WWE Hall of Fame induction, so it'd be worth looking
It's
up
probably
to
coming
see if
eventually.
he is in there or if he'll end up getting one of the Legacy awards, because I feel the Legacy Award has been created for those who didn't really work in WWE but had a significant impact in the world of wrestling.
Yeah, and actually, I do like the legacy because the one guy that went in, it was either this year or last year, but of course this year. I maybe it was Wolf was the last name, but anyways, he was a jobber in WWF and I think WCW as well. But he did have a career outside of all that, and that's where you look at someone like Tom Zink. He had a somewhat of a career in WWF, but then after that. And that's actually in either next week's or the week after that, whole thing on him. So 10 years ago, Sami Callihan defeated A.R. Fox to win the 2011 CZW Best of the Best tournament. Other participants were Drake Younger, Trent Steven, M.K. McKinnon, Chuck Taylor, Johnny Gargano, Samurai Del Sol, Lince Dorado, LCH, Alex Colon, Willie Mack, and Greg Excellent. 8 years ago, Fandango's theme, Cha La La, comes in at number 44 on the UK singles chart. This is not the first time a WWE song would make the charts in the UK. Hacksaw Jim Duggan's single from '93 WrestleMania album hit number 71 in '93, and WWF Superstar Slam Jam would hit number 4 on the UK charts in '92.
That's surprising.
UK, what's going on there? That I can understand Cha La La, that's kind of, when you drive in your car or walk in, that's a nice song, but that Hacksaw song, oh my God, how did that even make it on the charts there? I just don't understand at all.
No clue.
I looked it up and it's true. It's a happy 27th birthday to Bin Wang, aka Tian Bing, known as one of the first Chinese-born wrestlers to sign with WWE. He made his television debut in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic in October of 2017 and competed in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal at WrestleMania 33. His first main roster bout, he would leave the WWE in 2008. And it's a happy 80th birthday for Peter Edward Rose, aka Kane's bitch, Pete Rose. April 15th, 30 years ago, WWF tapes the 29th and final edition of Saturday Night's Main Event on NBC until 2006. The Ultimate Warrior defeated Sergeant Slaughter by DQ. Ted DiBiase and Bret Hart fought to a double countout. And Mr. Perfect last eliminated Greg Valentine to win the 20-man Battle Royal. 26 years ago, ECW presented Hostile City Showdown from ECW Arena in Philly. On the card, Axel Rotten defeated Ian Rotten in a barbed wire baseball bat match. Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko fought to a 30-minute time limit draw for the ECW TV belt. The Sandman defeated Shane Douglas to win the ECW Heavyweight Championship. The match would end with the help of Woman turning on Douglas. Douglas would put on a Raw t-shirt and leave through the crowd on his way to a disappointing run in WWF. 911 defeated Ron Simmons, and Cactus Jack defeated Terry Funk. 25 years ago, Brian Pillman fell asleep at the wheel and hit a tree trunk. His Hummer H1 would flip and cause severe damage to his ankle. Doctors would fuse his ankle in a locked position, and 2 months later would become the first man to sign a guaranteed deal with the WWE.
Yeah, May 6th, I believe it is the premiere of Dark Side of the Ring Season 3. You'll be hearing Crave in Canada and Vice in the United States. I'm not sure where else, what broadcasters are everywhere else, but check your listings. But May 6th is season premiere of Season 3, and it's starting off with a 2-hour Pillman episode.
Wow. Hey, man, I'm telling you, Pillman, he was pretty good, and it's neat the fact that his body was not in the best of shape when he was a wrestler, and one of his legs was shorter than the other. So,
And then his
and
raspy
it's
voice.
just amazing that the injuries that he had, that he was still able to do what he did.
Yeah, well, I was going to say his raspy voice because of all the surgeries on his throat throughout the years.
Yes.
Going from a Cincinnati Bengal football player to everything they did in wrestling. Started off as a high flyer, did the whole thing with Austin and the Hollywood Blondes, got too hot to be kept together, became a horseman for a while, then went to WWE and continued his feud with Austin. Steve still wears a necklace that honors his friendship with Brian, and it was an unlikely friendship between the two because they were just thrown together, but then decided to start dressing alike for being a legit tag team since they were put together. And as said, all these years later, he's still wearing that necklace.
There's a lot of friendships that bonded over wrestling or in wrestling, and it's a neat thing to see. 19 years ago on Raw, Raven defeated Bubba Ray Dudley to win the WWF Hardcore Championship, only to lose to Tommy Dreamer. Then he lost it to Stevie Richards, and then Richards lost it to Bubba Ray Dudley. 14 years ago, TNA presented Lock Down, where every match is in a steel cage. Chris Sabin defeated Alex Shelley, Jay Lethal, Shark Boy, and Sanjay Dutt in an elimination match to retain the TNA X Division Championship. Senshi defeated Austin Starr, and Bob Backlund was the special referee. James Storm defeated Chris Harris in a blindfold match. Team 3D, Brother Devon and Brother Ray defeated the Latin American Exchange, Hernandez and Homicide, in an electrified steel cage match to win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. And Team Angle, Jeff Jarrett, Kurt Angle, Rhino, Samoa Joe, and Stink defeated Team Cage, Abyss, AJ Styles, Christian Cage, Scott Steiner, and Tom Go in a lethal lockdown match. Harley Race was the special enforcer. Stink would get the pin, earned a NWA World Heavyweight Championship match at Sacrifice. 7 years ago, TNA presented Lockdown. Team Garrett Bischoff, AJ Styles, Austin Aries, Garrett Bischoff, Mr. Anderson, and RVD defeated Team Eric Bischoff, consisting of Bully Ray, Christopher Daniels, Eric Bischoff, Gunner, and Kazarian. And that was in a lethal lockdown match. With the loss, Eric Bischoff was banished from TNA. Eric Young and ODB defeated Rosita and Sarita to retain the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championship. And Bobby Roode defeated James Storm to retain the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. And to end it all, it's a happy 43rd birthday to Daniel Healy Sowold Jr., aka Austin Aries. Aries is a TNA Triple Crown champion, a two-time ROH World Champion, and an ROH World Tag Team Champion. And that is it for this week. As always, This Week in Wrestling is compiled from the vast land of Google, Wikipedia, CagesideSeats.com, and most importantly, from fans and journalists that had front row seats to history and happened to write it all down.
There you go. Well, thank you for taking us through that trip. You said you're going to send me the next 1 or 2 weeks ahead so I can see what's going on with that and be ready for our next couple weeks of This Week in History. As it usually happens, Thursdays at noon on YouTube and Facebook and anywhere else you get your podcast from, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and yeah, so many different things. We're part of the Ontario Indie Podcast Network and the Genres Podcast Network. And of course, we are assisted with the help of Coolbet, who is also presenting our Scumbags Predictions League. And we just had our first event this past weekend during WrestleMania, but there's still time for people to get involved and have a chance all year long to earn points for this championship belt. So, sponsored by Coolbet, as you see, and made by Undisputed Belts. So that is, guys, go to our website, scumbagswrestling.ca, to find out how you can be a part of it and catch our other shows, including Fantasy Warfare Tournament and the Scumbags podcast every Thursday at 8 p.m. That's pretty much what I have to plug. Anything else you want to add, Chris?
No. I'm moving, so my studio will look different. Meaning I'll be in a different room.
It's all good.
There's a nice
Um,
closet in the new space. If the wife lets me, I want to completely do it in sound tile, and that way be able to hear a lot more clearer and all that other fun stuff.
well, we'll look forward to seeing what the new digs look like as the progression of moving happens. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody for being a part of this, and tune in later on tonight for the Scumbags Wrestling podcast. We're going to look at what happened at WrestleMania and the fallout with any news leading to the next pay-per-views that are coming up for not only Impact Wrestling but also WrestleMania Backlash. So we'll see you later on tonight. Have a good one.